It's been a while since I've done a Friday feature, but wanted to catch you up. I am here with good friend. This is Bourbon Brad. He's going to inform us on tastings and how to tell the difference. So Brad, take it away. Tell us what you are the expert at.
Well, we're going to stick to bourbon, not beer, by the way. I am drinking beer, so I notice you probably have seen this in the little video snippet. However, I am Bourbon Brad, and one of the things that I do here locally in Nashville, Tennessee, is I do a lot of whiskey, bourbon, moonshine, and scotch tastings. And we'll save the difference between all those here for a moment. But I do that here locally with different conventions and companies that come in, not only nationally, but also internationally. And oftentimes what we'll do is we'll do a random tasting of different products that are out there, many of which you're probably familiar with. And we talk about the history of these products. We talk about the little nuances that go into what makes these products different from one another. And we have a lot of fun when we do this. Now, Amber here and I got started talking about this just moments ago, literally.
Yeah.
Because she was talking about, you know, Bourbon Brad?
It all tastes the same.
Tastes the same. So I said, well, Amber, here's the deal. You are not properly testing this stuff. So I always tell people, you got to go through a 4-step process if you really want to identify what's going on with the different whiskeys and bourbons or scotches that you're tasting out there, folks. And so what you do, first of all, avoid the put it in a tumbler or put it in a shot glass and just down it and say, wow, that burned, or it was smooth, or whatever. You got to avoid that. Your brother-in-law, your sister-in-law, I know they have a tendency to do this, but what you want to do, people, is you want to take it, you want to put just a little bit in a shot glass or in a tumbler. I always tell people, try it neat. And what I mean by that is if you put ice in it or whatever, you're diluting it. And a lot of people, that's a good thing to do depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Yeah. But when you are tasting the different grains, what you want to do is you want to do it neat, where you have no H2O, no ice, no nothing in it. And you want to have the bourbon, whiskey, or scotch at room temperature.
Yeah.
So then you put it in that little tumbler, and then what you do is you hold that glass container, shot glass, what have you, maybe about 5-6 inches from your nose, like I'm doing with my beer here, and you sniff it. You get it up your nostrils. Kind of breathe it in, let that process just for a few seconds. And then when you're done doing that, what you want to do is the same thing, but this time you want to try to get it on the roof of your mouth, and you want to breathe through your mouth and take the aroma of the bourbon, scotch, or whiskey up onto the roof of your mouth. And again, now you've got it up your nose, now you've got it up the roof of your mouth, and you're letting your taste buds process that. Okay. Third step is to put just a drop or two as close to the center of your tongue as you possibly can.
I was wondering if it was the tip or the back or
the center. And here's the deal, because your taste buds in the back, the center, and the front of your tongue are entirely different. You have 26 receptors, for those of you that want to get technical. And what you want to do is expose them the best you can, and you start by the center of your tongue. And then you get that on your center of your tongue, and you smack it. So you've gone through getting it up your nose, you've gone through trying to get the aroma on the roof of your mouth, and now you've got a little bit on the center of your tongue. Now, and by the way, it doesn't matter if you're a bourbon aficionado or if you're just trying this the first time. There are benefits, and I'll explain that when we get to the last step. Last step is to go ahead and start to sip it slowly. What you will find is if you're new to this and bourbons just burn, you're going to find the burn is substantially less, okay? Now, if you're an aficionado or you just want to start to identify the differences with the different bourbons and whiskeys and grains out there, what will start to happen is by doing it this way, you will start to detect, you know what, there's something different in the process. This has been filtered. This has got more rye. This has got more corn. This has got more malted barley. And you'll start to identify that. Now, it'll take a while for you to do that, but the immediate benefit is that it will not burn. It'll be a much more pleasant experience. Longer term, you'll start to really acclimate yourself and get more knowledgeable about the grains in the product that you're sampling. So, we had to get that off our chest here because we're at a 4th of July party here. And in case you can't see the construction in the background, our good friend here is building a phenomenal pool. But anyway, that's another day for another story. Another story for another day. To recap, let's finish up with something kind of fun. I do whiskey tastings, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, for a lot of people internationally and nationally that come to Nashville. The number one question, believe it or not, I know some of you watching this probably think this is a stupid question, but people, I will tell you, about 95% of the people that I interact with do not know the difference between bourbon, scotch, moonshine, and whiskey. They really don't. So here's the deal. Moonshine, whiskey, bourbon, scotch, they are all whiskeys. If you go back centuries, literally centuries, back to Ireland, Scotland, etc., where a lot of this perfection of distilling really got going, they all called it whiskey. And whiskey, by definition, is anytime you take a grain and you ferment it for usually a period of a couple of days, and then you go ahead and you distill it, it's a whiskey. Now, if you stop at that stage and you don't do anything else, you ferment it, you distill it, and you bottle it, it's moonshine, okay? And so moonshine is quick. It's a quick process, only takes a couple of days, and it comes out as a moonshine. So all scotch, all whiskeys, all bourbon at one stage of their production, we're all a moonshine. Okay? Now, where we start to get off the reservation a little bit is if the predominant grain to the tune of 92% or more is malted barley, okay? And malted barley, just to explain, is different than regular barley in that malted barley is barley that has been sprouted for typically a couple of days, depending on what the master distiller is trying to accomplish in the sweetness of the brew. Because when you malt it and you sprout it for a couple of days, you loosen the sugar enzymes up, and it tends to make it a little bit sweeter. So if it's 92% or more malted barley, and then it goes through aging processes and so forth, it is technically a scotch, okay? And it also should actually be made in Scotland, because there are grains that are a little bit sweeter and so forth, and the alkalinity in the water that's used and so forth is a little bit different in Scotland, so technically it should be from Scotland. But then it's a scotch. Now, if the predominant grain, 51% or more, is corn, okay, and it goes through these processes and it's aged for, or I should say, aged in a barrel for a minimum of 2 years or what have you, then it is a bourbon. And by the way, as long as it's made in the United States, okay, and it goes through the aging for 2 years, 51% or more corn, it is a bourbon. It can be made in Colorado, it can be made in Oregon. It is a bourbon at that point in time. A lot of people think that it has to be from Tennessee or Kentucky in order to be a bourbon. No, that is not a qualifier. So that's a bourbon. Everything else is going to be considered a whiskey. So if it's got a lot of rye, or if it's blended, or it's got less malted barley, or more corn or less corn or what have you, then it's just going to fall under the general whiskey definition. So that is the technical difference between whiskey, bourbon, scotch, and moonshine. And we've shared with you how to properly sample these.
Taste it.
So I hope you enjoy.
As a novice, what would be the best thing to start out with? Somebody that, as far as taste, what do you recommend?
What I recommend is probably trying something that's maybe flavored and a little bit lower in alcohol. For instance, Jack Daniel's has got a great product out there called Tennessee Honey. Now, it is 70 proof instead of the typical 80 plus proof, so it's going to be a little bit lighter, and it is going to be a little bit sweeter. So a lot of times somebody that is just getting acclimated to this taste and so forth, that's a pretty good product to start out with. Another good product is Jack Daniel's, and I know I'm not trying to sell Jack Daniel's here, but it's a good product, and it's Gentleman Jack. And the reason why I think that's another good product to get people acclimated towards this with is because it's double filtered versus a lot of your different whiskeys and bourbons out there that are only single filtered. So I think there's some benefit to trying that. And another great product, I know I'm giving you a long answer to a short question, but another great product to try is an Irish whiskey. And the reason is Irish whiskey is different than our domestic whiskeys in that domestically about 95% of our whiskeys and bourbons are only distilled once, whereas Irish whiskey and Scottish whiskeys are all distilled 3 times. So what that does is it's almost like a filtering process. It washes the grain, takes out a little bit more of the oil, a little bit more of the sediment, and so it tends to make it a little bit smoother. We've all heard that Irish whiskeys are very smooth. And so it's a good way to get yourself acclimated to whiskey tasting as well, is to try an Irish whiskey.
You definitely know your stuff. So where can people find you? I know you do talks for different companies, and you go downtown or you meet them wherever.
Right.
So is it a phone number? Do you have
I got a phone number. I got, my email address is Brad, B-R-A-D, .salow, S as in sale, A-L-O-W, @gmail.com. Notify me. I do private gatherings, I do public gatherings, I do corporate gatherings, I do international gatherings. I do everything based here out of Nashville, Tennessee. I have been requested to do some traveling, but they probably don't feel I'm worth the money. No, I'm just kidding. But no, that's how you can get a hold of me. 426-4873 is my phone number, area code 613, and I'm happy to take calls, questions. Should you want to set up a private gathering or a business type gathering. I do Christmas parties, I do birthday parties.
Yeah.
I do a lot of corporate events and conventions and that type of thing. I do groups as small as 6 and 8. Typically on average it's quite a bit bigger than that, so I'm used to doing groups that are 200 and 300 and 400 as well. So there's no group too large, no group too small. It's a lot of fun though. People really love it, and it's always a good icebreaker if you've got a group of people that you're trying to get together that maybe need that icebreaker, like for a business convention and that type of thing, or if it's a family reunion, and I've done family reunions, by the way. It's a good thing because there's always some bourbon whiskey people as part of the family that just want to go and talk about it and have an additional element to their get together. So,
well, you definitely know your stuff, and I've known Brad for a long time. He's talked about it every time we've gotten together, still trying to get used to some of the different tastes, but give Brad a call. As always, thanks for watching. Hope everyone had a good 4th of July.